Hi, thank you so much for tuning in. We have such an exciting program today. Welcome to the Brooklyn Rails 1042nd New Social Environment. I'm Eleanor, Programs Associate here at the Rail, and today I have the huge pleasure and privilege of being your MC for a conversation featuring Olivia Kan-Sperling and Joel Danilewitz. And now I'll introduce our guest host for today. Olivia Kan-Sperling works on and in popular prose, criticism as crushing, and texts that perform, especially as other media. Her book, Island Time, about the psycho-geographies of Kendall Jenner and Lil Peep, is a recursive novella figured as a virtual world. It is accompanied by a music video guided symbolization reading game, currently vaporware only. Her writing on art, literature, software, and style has been published in N+1, Cabinet, Spike, and the Paris Review, where she's an assistant editor. She lives in New York. And Joel Danilewitz is a critic based in New York. His writing on art, music, and literature has been featured in Text zur Kunst and the Brooklyn Rail, where we're so lucky to have him as a production assistant. Joel and Olivia, thank you so much for being here, and I'll turn it over to you now, Joel, to get us started.
Thank you so much for those intros. So I just want to get started. I think we wanted to start with a reading from Island Time, Olivia's book. So yeah, if we want to just go right into it.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for the beautiful intro. And I'll just start. I have the book here. This is just from the beginning. I think it's like useful to see the text kind of because it's very like the sort of typographical choices are sort of relevant, but we can come back to that. But it begins one morning, prologue. Kendall Jenner wakes up. We zoom in on beautiful almond eyes opening. They are animated by a mysterious twinkle. I wonder what I should do today, she says with a yawn, petting a small black cat with curious white markings that almost make the shape of a question mark. Good morning, Midnight, she says. Midnight squirms over a gleaming grid of sunlight projected across a big white bed. Kendall has long black hair that falls to her waist in a tumbling and glimmering waterfall. Kendall sighs. We follow her into a small, modern apartment. A breeze enters through sliding glass doors that open onto a crescent-shaped balcony. In addition to a kitchen corner, there's a square gray rug and a couch, and a door going outside. Light comes in through a skylight. Kendall smiles dreamily, stretching her sleek, tan limbs as she presses the button on the coffee grinder. Doesn't Kendall Jenner live in a beautiful mansion? Where are her friends, family, and business partners? Where is the wall with the portal-like oval that flushes pink and blue designed by James Turrell? Her cars. She's a car girl. As she settles on the couch with her cafe au lait, she drags a finger through the cup and brings it to her lips meditatively. Midnight laps at her bowl, which is filled with fresh, off-white cream, the only food she eats. A clock ticks. Clouds run over the sun and shadows move quickly through the apartment, like in a nature documentary when there is time-lapse of animals moving through the desert. As shades of gray pattern over the simple surfaces of the scene, different objects are briefly illuminated. A designer handbag, a spiral-bound notebook, and something under the couch we can't quite see. Then, a tinkling melody. Beveled black music notes dance on the breeze. Through the glass door, we perceive a multicolored shape. Ribbon-like, it curves and then flattens, twisting and floating, in the wind and through the window. The jingle intensifies, then stops. The notes hang in the air, then pop, like bubbles. Midnight's collar seems to have a tinkling silver bell on it. She has pounced on the paper and pinned it to the floor. Kendall looks up. Midnight? What's that? It is a... This is what this page looks like. It is a map of the island. Oh,
Yeah, I also have the book. I can show while you're reading if you want.
Okay, cool. Okay, cool. Map of the island. In bright colors, a jumble of points of interest emerging, almost three-dimensionally, from the lightly crumpled paper. Areas of the island, historic Coast Point, a nest of miniature colonial houses, next to the skyscrapers of downtown city. adjacent to a new development by the water, Sunset Edge. At the heart of the island, verdant pine forests surround a mysterious turquoise lake. Several locations pulse and glow. Among them, the Corporate Cafe, page 11, page 75, One Financial Plaza, page 973, the Wicked Whalers Bar, more pages, the cemetery, the beach, and Lustron Labs. Kendall steps out onto the crescent-shaped balcony and is lost in thought for a while. We see Sunset Edge, pleasant and brand new, but also strangely empty, like an ancient ruin. The blue ocean begins at the end of the street. Sand blown from the beach has collected in pools on the even, equally sand-colored squares of sidewalk. Kendall murmurs, tapping her fingers against the railing. An asterisk spins in her eye. She makes up her mind and then selects her favorite outfit, the one she wears to go unnoticed. She folds the map 1, 2, 3 times and into her designer handbag. Then she bounces down the stairs and shuts the door behind her. We know it's Kendall, but in real life, would we? The real Kendall's actual live face is too unmarked and clean. Every beautiful girl looks like Kendall, and Kendall looks like no one at all. Eyes glance, move on, turn back, one moment, keep going. She kind of looks like, but a movement of light, then again, not really. Kendall is a ghost girl, so to speak. And this is what allows her to slip in and out of the shadows. And that is exactly what happens now, as she treads slightly down the street, heading away from the beach and deeper into the island. Palm trees wave in the breeze. Kendall wears a skin-tight black spandex shorts and a matching spaghetti strap sports bra. She stops to frown at 3 electric scooters perched at a jaunty angle on the sidewalk. They're the kids' T-shaped kind, operated by kicking and gliding, except motorized. They have lights on them that glow and pulse, even in daytime, changing from red to magenta to green to yellow, like a traffic signal for another universe. One day they weren't there, and then they were. Weird. The sidewalk seems to stretch out into the distance forever. ... 1, 2, 3 different landscapes pass by. ... Her footsteps take her to ... One Financial Plaza. We find ourselves in a clearing among skyscrapers patterned with rectangular windows that reflect each other indefinitely. In the center, the empty space, is a marble splashy circular fountain with arcing jets of water. There's all these glimmering gold coins hovering in the misty air around the fountain, ... question mark. Each one rotates around its interior axis suspensefully. Kendall blinks and walks away. Then she walks back, plucks one from the air, and puts it in her handbag. She twirls around in a circle, gazing up. Affixed to a building, a shiny gold plaque, Textron Tower. Kendall approaches and runs her slender fingers over the metallic words. Then, all of a sudden, she sees a door. It seems to glow mysteriously. She goes in. And then I realized there was a footnote at the beginning that maybe is useful context that I forgot to read. Kendall Jenner is the highest paid model in the world. In 2014, she co-authored with sister Kylie a ghost-written YA novel. In 2020, Kendall's home was featured in an Architectural Digest video in which is visible an ovoid James Turrell sculpture set into a white wall. It glows and pulses in a rainbow of colors. As the accompanying article explains, it is animated by shifting computer-programmed LED lights. Kendall also suffers from anxiety.
Awesome. I'm really glad you read that first part also, because it really leads well into like my initial questions about it, especially the map. And I want to talk also, if we want to start the slideshow. Yeah, awesome. So yeah, I wanted to talk to you about like the spatiality of the book. It's like a kind of a part of it I found super interesting. You described the book as exploring the psycho-geographies of Kendall Jenner and Lil Peep. And obviously they're on this island where kind of everything is happening over and over again, but Lil Peep is lost. And yeah, I wanted to just kind of ask how you conceived of this like recursive architecture within the book, which is just so cool, especially like the map page. And then you go and you kind of can go and like collect these little things in the book, and then you can go back to the map or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, The super banal answer is that I started writing this during COVID. I was in college living in Providence, and it was like the taking walks era, like of quarantine. And of course, like whatever, our lives were structured this way, in a way where time kind of stopped moving linearly. And it felt, I think, to many of us like we were caught in this kind of loop. And Providence, where I was going to college, had always kind of struck me as this sort of video game-like environment. There's something about the architecture of the downtown area, which is a lot of these buildings like Textron Tower or the corporate cafe are real places in Providence. It always reminded me of a kind of virtual world game, and playing those games also sort of engages a different type of temporality. It's not like some video games, obviously you like progress through levels and like you can reach an end, even though they also involve a lot of repetition. But in virtual worlds, you sort of, as in real life, are just going around, but everything's sort of always the same with like slight variations. And then I think on another level, like I didn't study fiction in college. I didn't take any English classes, but I did study computer science, and like I just think in terms of like forms and shapes that inform my thinking, or like structures. The most readily available figures were actually like recursive structures, because like in programming, especially like recursive programming, which I was trained in, like you're creating textual systems that are going to run again and again, and where like inputs are being fed into outputs, and then something else happens that's pre-programmed, and is essentially, and in that sense, the same, and yet the outcome is different as different users interact with it, or as the inputs and outputs are different. So I think like if I'd studied, traditional novels or even other time-based media like film, it would have been a different shape.
Totally. Yeah, and that's interesting too, because I was gonna ask, I know that like I saw on looking at your website that you do like a lot of coding, and like obviously you have the vaporware site that is like in addition that, or if you get the new version of this book, you can like scan a QR code and it takes you there. And yeah, and I was just kind of curious, this kind of jumps ahead, but it gets to this question I had also. I know we're going to talk more about pop literature, and you wrote culture pop literature for N+1, and kind of just idea around. But yeah, I'm curious more if you could talk more about like coding as part of your writing practice, and yeah, just more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I I wish it informed it more. It's something that I would like to return to. I think this was like very much conceived of as like a print book. Like the materiality of the page was really important to me, that we're creating a digital space, but like it has to be on the page. I think the but so okay, I guess I think maybe it would be like to answer this, like maybe it'd be worth getting into the way the text is kind of like formatted, which
Yeah, totally.
I
I can
guess,
also hold it up.
oh yeah, okay. I think I'm like, yeah, it's illegible I think your screen is like not reversed, or maybe it is reversed in a way that the
Oh.
audio mine is like will be backwards. But basically, the prose is like there's certain words that are like capitalized.
Yeah.
And there's other ones that have asterisks around them. And these are actually conventions of like text-based role-playing games that I used to play as a child, like where you're sort of like in a forum, I guess, writing a story in real time with other like nerds. But it's also kind of like a video game. So you're, at least the games or stories that I was involved in. So if there's an object that you could kind of interact with, you would write like the cat walks over to the like bug, and the bug would be capitalized. And it's almost like how in a virtual world game or in a video game, there'd be sort of a kind of like the AirPods would be on the sidewalk and they would be like glowing with a kind of halo.
Mhm.
Or there'd be in the book, there's certain verbs that have these asterisks, and um, in these games that I would play, it would be like a repeatable function, almost like an emoji. Like it would be like waves or like smiles. And I would always imagine that almost like a GIF that replays. And so I wanted to use those conventions in the book to kind of heighten, I guess, the virtual element, but also feel like it was almost like insert the kind of experience of interactivity in some way, or even like the hallucination of interactivity into a printed text. And I think that I wouldn't have come to that style if I hadn't been coding, which is basically all about interactive. Like you're writing, you're creating in a way static texts, but each thing is an object or is a command. And yeah.
Yeah, no, it's super interesting, and it makes me kind of think about how like in the writing, there's something about it that like when Kendall's like apprehending these objects, or in this page here we have like the fan fiction of a Naruto. Um and you can kind of see also here like the italicized words, and the way kind of like things are like certain words are kind of activated. It's almost like the text itself, like as you say, like pulses and glows, like which is really cool. And yeah, I guess it's like it's interesting to think about coding in that sense, because I guess because coding also, or like at least to me it seems like something that is very like remote, or like it's kind of like it obviously is something that you're doing, but it's also like you have this like it is part of a computer. So, and like kind of also like language and text and literature is this thing that is like produced by us, but also kind of like differentiated from us, is like kind of remote from us, something that we like are kind of isolated from, like language and stuff. Um, yeah.
Yeah, it creates this kind of like ghost self, I guess. Um, this text that's been like cut off from your body that then exists in this strange other space. And I think that that's like the dimension of writing and reading that I'm most interested in, and have always been. And it's sort of also, I guess, what's thematically addressed in the book. I guess I should say like the um the plot, if you can call it that, of the novella is basically that like Kendall Jenner, who is a real life model, sort of Instagram celebrity, Kardashian, is like wandering around on this island, and she's like at the beginning she like you has these interactions with this her sort of like lover boyfriend, who in this case has the name of the rapper Lil Peep, and then he sort of like disappears, and she um then spends the rest of the book kind of like going to these different locations and like picking up clues to try and find this person. And at the end, he like reappears, and it's almost like the whole thing starts over again. Um, why did I just say that? Because, oh, yeah, because it's like this ghost presence, like, and trying to, it's like this mode of like alienation, I guess, from this highly mediated object. In this case, obviously, like Lil Peep, we encounter him almost through descriptions of his music videos, and Kendall is, of course, like a fashion model. So yeah.
Yeah, and that goes back also, I wanted to kind of talk about why you chose them. Um it like for me at reading it, it kind of seemed like Kendall is kind of like, as you write, she looks like no one and everyone. And Little Peep, I feel like, now obviously he passed away, and if there I felt something like very mournful about him throughout the book. I felt like obviously the fact that he has disappeared feels like alluding to that. But yeah, I just kind of, and also drawing it back to pop culture and the use of pop culture in your work. I just want to like talk more about why you use these characters specifically.
Totally. I like, so I was drawn to Kendall, as you said, because of her kind of blankness. I mean, I spent a lot of time looking at models on Instagram because I like doing it. I wouldn't say she's like the hottest or the most beautiful or interesting visually, much less like as a person. And I've never watched actually the Kardashians really, except for clips. But I think that something about her, there's this really eerie mood, and I think you see it actually in this photo that's up right now. Like she looks kind of like an avatar, like the I think she's actually like a very bad model, because she doesn't like captivate the camera. Like she's so stiff and almost looks like a wax figure. And I knew that I wanted to write essentially about myself, or my emotions, of course, and like feel like I was intentionally creating this highly artificial, like I could have created a character and called her like whatever, like Bianca or like Lily or something, but that felt silly to me. Like it felt like so it felt like concealing the artifice in a way to like create like a fake version of myself that could be a real version, but putting my emotions into Kendall Jenner seemed a lot more truthful or something as to the operation of fictionalization I'm doing. Um, Little Peep, as you said, is like totally the opposite. I think he's just someone that I was like an artist who I was obsessed with, really, and like I couldn't as Kendall is like obsessed with him in the story, like certain images from his music videos were like sort of intrusive thoughts almost that I couldn't that I needed to like get out. And so
Okay.
writing with him was one way of doing that. And I think in general, uh, and this is like, I guess, why fan fiction in general is interesting to me. This isn't quite a fan fiction in the traditional sense because neither of the characters, like a traditional fan fiction would be like, oh, like we're in Little Peep's dressing room before the show, and then like Kendall Jenner comes in and says it would be like embedded in their real narratives, more real lives,
Mhm.
more closely. Um, but I just think that like in cinema, for example, you have a character and then you get to like cast someone else as the character. Like you can, it's like, oh, Nicole Kidman is playing this person, and that adds so much more depth culturally in terms of narrative, aesthetically to the viewer's experience. And it's so frustrating that like in reading you normally can't do that. Um, so I think like most people's associations with these two people are actually probably pretty similar to mine. It would be more difficult to use like um more controversial or like less flat figures. But yeah.
Okay, interesting. Actually, could we go to the slide with with the Lil Peep music videos? Or we
Oh
can
yeah.
also, yeah, which number 6. Yeah. Because so right, there's that one chapter where you write like as a flashback the music video of gym class. And I mean it's such a cool chapter because it feels you're like writing it as this flashback. It almost feels kind of like the way you're experiencing everything feels like it's being experienced for the first time also. It's just like a really cool chapter. I was like obsessed with it when I was reading it. I was like, and also just the way that like pop culture is like incorporated into your work, and that's something I kind of want to like continue to draw on, especially like pastiche and kind of like the use of different medias or different like figures or imagery in it. Yeah, I just want like interested in what you think that does like in terms of not like ornamenting a story, but actually like being like a crucial part of the content in a way.
Yeah, I mean, pop culture, I think, well, this is sort of banal, but like I think in a basic sense, like it is just genuinely what I want to write about, or like people are like write what you know or whatever, right? Or write what gives you actual the most emotion. And in my case, like things like the gym class music video or like the I guess it's obviously I have real experiences like with like real people who aren't Little Peep, but like um the kind of like in intensity that um the intense form of aesthetic experience that comes from like art, basically other people's art, other media, is just like more interesting to me as as an emotion or as an experience to write about. I think maybe other people have different ones, like whatever, getting divorced or whatever it might be. And in terms of like it being the content of their work, right? Like why include like Lil Peep lyrics in a book? Like what does it do? I think to me, like lyrics, for example, are so much as a form of writing, or as a form of language, like they're in a way so much stronger than a novel could ever be. Like they're so intense. There's this like high degree of melodrama. There's so much emotion that can be infused into this. And there's a reason why like people get like lyrics tattooed on their bodies, or like especially teenagers like love to like copy down lyrics in their notebooks or post them on Tumblr or whatever. And we're sort of like trained out of that relationship to language, and to like we're trained into a sort of more a less sentimental perhaps, and more uh intellectualized mode of aesthetic consumption. But I think that those early ways that we relate to art or language are like the most interesting to me. And when you see lyrics on the page, if you know the song, if you don't know the song, or if you do know the song, it's like, wow, like this is such a pale ghost, really, of the actual song, of the actual experience of a music video. And that feeling of loss, I guess, is what's interesting to me.
Yeah. Yeah, like it's so interesting because that's so much what comes across in the book too, is like the experience of like the primacy of objects kind of, and like just yeah, like encountering things on like that are removed from that. And I'm also curious, like in that sense, I think it's interesting because fan fiction is obviously written from like an individual level, but you're also writing about something that's like collectively loved. And I feel like that's really also what creates like that weird kind of like stippling effect of writing it. So yeah, I just and then so reading that and like reading the Naruto fan fiction, it's kind of like the thingness of everything. It becomes like really like, you know what I mean? Like the objects have like a thingness. Like that's what I kind of just kept feeling. Um so yeah, I just kind of I guess I'm where did that question lead to? But yeah, I
No,
just
I mean, it's like, I think, oh, okay, maybe this also relates to the pop culture. It's like, it's not, how is this book different from like a traditional novel? It's like pointing indexically very concretely to really existing objects in the world, like both in the prose style, kind of like, maybe let's not go, let's go back in the presentation, but like the the text itself, right, with the capitalization, sort of gives the illusion of like the word itself being an object, and like has traces of this materiality of like a real knot or gold coin or whatever. And then we also know that we're indexing like a real life person in the text. So there's a kind of like consensus reality that we can point to, I guess, whereas in a different type of novel, it's all spun from the same thread somehow,
Mhm.
of fantasy, of fiction.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's also like because what you write about in your essay in Towards Pop Literature, you write about how so much of kind of contemporary literature is very character or psychologically driven, and to the point where it's like you kind of are meant to empathize with that character on like this sort of like mind melding way. And so yeah, and I guess it's just interesting also to think about that as like a component of like bringing back like attention to form and style, and like form as style, and like subject matter as technique. And yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
just
totally. I think like, I mean, I'm okay, like granted, like I'm probably most interested in literature less on a level of like emotion or realism, but I do think like, I think my main point in that essay talking about Esther Yi's book YN also is like a major human emotion is actually alienation, and like the sort of friction with mediation. And that is just, that can be, I mean, there's lots of books about kind of like alienated, melancholy, sad women characters in particular. but why not create that effect on a more formal level? And I think like in general, my generation has like a much is much more like attuned to the way that mediation works. Like you don't actually really have to have like a semiotics degree to understand how form and content operate this online in particular. Like with memes, for example, you have like an image and everyone knows like, oh, we have an image and we can like keep reframing it and giving it new meanings by circulating it in new contexts and adding different texts to it. And like everyone understands because people of my generation have by a pretty young age already migrated from like, between Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Tumblr, TikTok now, how like the platform, the form creates possibilities for meaning and also society, right? Social media. And so I think it's really a shame that like literature is actually lagging behind popular culture and like the sort of like level of intelligence and media literacy that any like 11-year-old has online today. And I think it's important to create literature for people who understand those kind of reframings and also both whose lives are and whose emotional experiences are so much shaped both positively and negatively by the experience of that type of mediation.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, I feel like that was also what I think stuck out for me was just feeling kind of to read something that both incorporated like a vernacular that was like very like alive in this like internet way that only I could like I like felt just like so like almost moved by that because of just the way that you were able to like braid that with a really like lovely like descriptive style as well. It's just like really um different. And I read YN as well after reading your essay and also really loved that book. And yeah, um it's cool to see like yeah, not enough literature. And it's interesting too because you kind of wrote about how like David Foster Wallace had obviously like kind of written from like images and pop culture. There's like obviously a lot of other examples too. I was thinking also about like there are like different examples of kind of not like fan fiction literature. Hannah Black's Party, where she's kind of like, narrating this scene, but the characters in it are celebrities. So yeah, but I'm curious if there were like influences for you in a literary sense. There was a lot that felt like very new and innovative that didn't feel like it felt like what the precedent was for it was like the internet or like fan fiction, but not as much even like other authors, but I was just wondering kind of more about your literary influence and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I'm honestly not super compared to like most people writing like I don't have a great education in like literature itself actually. Like so I definitely wasn't actually coming at writing this from like a particularly intellectual level, even though I now can intellectualize it in all these ways. I think like in this book like Thomas Pynchon was like a huge influence. Not, I mean, at the beginning, I like thought about it as not a fan fiction, but like a sort of rip off of Crying of Lot 49, where you also have
Mhm.
this kind of like ditzy female narrator who's like solving some like weird mystery. And obviously these techniques that I'm using are like pretty standard like postmodernist techniques of like collage. And I read like Infinite Jest as a kid. But I think like in terms of the actual prose, Pynchon's influence is definitely there. Like in the style kind of shifts between this like very pared back command based like video game move avatar text style, and then kind of these more involved like long sentences that I associate with Pynchon.
Yeah, definitely.
But I think what like differentiates fan fiction, obviously like talking about pop literature, I was like, there's a lot of ways to describe like Esther Yi's work or fan fiction. Obviously, like postmodernism is like what it is. Like it would be in that Wikipedia entry or something, because of the techniques of collage. But I think like specifically, I wanted to hone in on the fan aspect of it. Like it's very different. David Foster Wallace and Infinite Jest, like granted, I haven't read that book in a while, but it's like this very confused kind of take on like media and TV, and he actually like hates it, right? Like it's all about how it's like all this shit is so bad for us, and like drugs are bad for us, and TV is bad, and it's very ironic, and there's almost something like disingenuous, I think, about that. Um, and like, what does it mean to write from a place and do criticism from a place of like adoration and love and like what does it mean to read? How is crushing on something like similar to reading it? That's like sort of always my question, I guess.
Yeah. No, yeah, I love that, the like crushing as criticism and like oh, like I think I remember some line in your essay about how like we love when you can tell that someone loves what they're writing or that they love to be writing and that they love what they're writing about. Which is just like something that feels missing a lot of the time. This like attention to the like aesthetic pleasure of writing and reading writing. Um, I'm trying to remember what were the slides that we still. Oh yeah,
Oh
I
yeah.
guess you now that we're kind of talking about like pastiche and stuff. And I when we were talking before this, you mentioned like the linguistic visual citational syntax that you're interested in, specifically Karen Kilimnick's work. If we could go to that slide with yes, the 9. Um, yeah. So yeah, I mean, and as you said it, the collaging of words and imagery producing what you call a multimedia collage effect. So yeah, I'm curious if you talk more about the art that is kind of like also part of this like pop literature or like kind of exemplifies this interest in like inscribing yourself in a narrative.
Yeah, so this is an oh, I guess right, I didn't actually mention her in this article, but in this piece I wrote this review of Esther Yi's book YN, talking about fan fiction. I sort of turn at the end towards um like examples. I do think people in other media, in art in particular, like fine art, painting, whatever, are have for a long time been much more attuned to these strategies, have been using these techniques and strategies consistently, not throughout art history, not since just the pop art movement, and like also afterwards. Whereas like maybe we had like a Pynchon de Lelot moment, but then literature had like a this kind of pomo moment that then completely disappeared. But there's a lot of I think also as an example, it's like easier to describe than a whole book. But like, so this painter and like installation artist, Karen Kalimnik, they're like not necessarily super interesting to me as paintings, but like I really like this thing that she does with her titles and the subjects. Here you can see,
Oh yeah,
this
I
is,
think the next slide, yeah.
yeah, there's like a painting of Leonardo DiCaprio, and then it'll say the title will be Prince Desiree on a break from Sleeping Beauty, out at Petrosian's for dinner. So in that way, she's like casting, like so efficiently, syntactically, casting Leonardo DiCaprio as Prince Desiree in Sleeping Beauty, and then putting him in this random other place, which is Petrosian's for dinner, and we don't see Petrosian's or dinner or anything in this image. It's just like a way of creating these gaps between like language and image and like forcing us to think about, okay, what, how can we see this image from so many different perspectives in the same way that you could see Leonardo DiCaprio, the actor, like kind of toggle your vision and like see him as all these different characters in all the different films that he kind of carries as like hallucinatory avatars around him when you see him. And then she uses that syntax for like a lot of different works, and like if you go to the next slide, like sorry, these are like photos of like a catalog I took. This is like insight into my working process, I guess.
No, yeah, I looked up Me Waiting for My Drug Dealer Boyfriend, Park Avenue. Oop, forgot
Yeah.
West Village or The Village, 1967.
Right, and it's like, oh, you can do so much in with punctuation. This is like more inventive use of like language to me than most novels, really. So yeah, that's all I have to say about that, I guess. But I think basically I think that's, you know, I, I am interested in like books that have pictures in them. My book has pictures in them, but I think what's actually more interesting is to consider how through fan fiction, through just using the names of certain known figures, are you creating like a multimedia text in which you're sort of like hallucinating a music video or hallucinating an Instagram post. Obviously, in a way, you could say that all language is multimedia in that way because it's making you hallucinate a coffee cup where there isn't actually a coffee cup. But it just like emphasizes that affordance rather than kind of concealing it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the pulsing and glowing that happens in your book a lot. I feel like that's what I felt like when I like that comes up so much, or like the asterisk and the winking. This kind of like, yeah, like I don't know, fluid dimension to it or something that is just kind of is like there and not. Um yeah. I'm trying to think what were the next slides?
Oh,
Um
also the video game, I guess. I don't know. There's a lot we
Oh
can.
yeah, yeah, we can go back to the video game if you want to talk about that more. That is I think slide 4, or no, just kidding. That one, yeah, that's the right one.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Right. So this is like the thing. Actually, maybe we should go to a slide later on. It's like this is a lot to read probably.
Oh yeah. I
But
think
basically,
yeah, number 12.
oh yeah, I think this illustrates it better. Like in this edition of the book, there's, as Joel mentioned, this like QR code that you can scan that takes you to a website. Actually, maybe I'll write it in the chat later.
I can put it on.
But there's like I wanted to talking about like I guess like indexing to other media, or having there be like a sort of ghost media within a book. I wanted to kind of like literalize that more in this like reissue that we did of the book this past year. And so this game doesn't like actually exist. I actually do want to code it if you know other people who can code it for me or people who can fund me to do that, let me know. But it's like I wanted to create this kind of fake game in which you like the text comes up on the screen, kind of like karaoke, or and one by one, and you can sort of like click on the sometimes like the words become like increasingly replaced by like different images, and it's quite baroque and complex, so I won't get into it now. But I just liked the idea of like actually like literalizing that this like for example like the all caps words with the halos on and making it into, instead of in this case like this is the sentence beautiful almond eyes opening, having words, and then you can actually like click on them and put them in your purse as Kendall does in the game. So that there, I was going somewhere with that, but basically this is like I like the idea of creating a website that's an extension of the book where also the game hasn't quite arrived yet. Like the site will eventually become the real playable version of the game if everything goes well in my life. But for now, it's like the same as Kendall and Little Peep. It's like this pointer to something that's broken or that's pending or like beach balling for like maybe years, and then at some point it shows up. and is extended in that way was interesting to me.
Yeah, yeah, that was what when I was playing it too. I was like, it's like funny how it like kind of cuts off at like two or three like in, but yeah, like it sends you on that same loop again that they're stuck in. Um, yeah, no, I hope that you find someone to fund. I would play it for it's such a cool like it's just such a cool extension of kind of your practice and like the way you or not even extension, but the way it kind of like these meta texts that you've like made as you like called them just it's just I think a really like interesting component to it that allows like obviously for uh like a different kind of relationship to like the words and images in the book and like a different experience with it all. So yeah, it's super cool. I'm trying to think what were the and then um yeah, and then also I'm trying to think where was I in my where are we in the slides? Okay. Oh, I guess maybe we want to go back. Um oh yeah. And this is from your essay about like the mood board fabric. Oh, what's it called? A figurative language mood board, fabric of reality. The kind of like uh yeah, that was another thing that was actually I had a different question. Sorry, I'm like jumping around a lot. Something I was thinking about though a lot. And I think I heard you talk about this on a podcast. Just kind of this idea of like the figure of like the girl in both like in this book in like fan fiction, just kind of like, and I think you talked about Andrea Long choose females and like a girl, everyone that she says that everyone is a girl or everyone is a female in the sense that we're all like vessels for desire. So I was curious just to talk more about like the figure of the girl and like the centrality of the like girl in fan fiction.
The girl. Okay, I think like I have not read Andrea Long Choose Females, so maybe that was someone else, but that is
Oh,
true. Like the desire, I guess, um is like a major emotion. I don't know, like vector structure that I'm interested in. Um the girl, I mean, I'm a girl. Unfortunately, like I'm always writing from myself. Like hopefully I would love to like come up with some like new sort of experiences or different person to be to write about something else. But I think like the I mean, like one way to answer this is like there's an essay that I think is like pretty good actually that came out recently, Everyone is a Girl Online, which kind of not it's not necessarily like saying anything super new, but ties together lots of theories of girlhood and like the internet to talk about how like the internet is like basically feminizing and like um our the way that we're forced to present ourselves like and produce ourselves like tying also like to Kuhn's theory of the young girl sort of makes that figure kind of like an avatar, shall we say, that we embody regardless of like our gender. And I do think that's fundamentally true. Um, and I think that fan fiction writers, I mean, what's interesting about fan fiction actually is that like it's mostly girls who write fan fiction, but like the characters in it are often they're often writing about guys. They're often writing about gay guys having sex who are not gay. Like it's like there's it's actually like it's more like the writer who is like the position who is like suffusing like the text with this like girl energy. That's like a horrible phrase, but like yeah, this longing is what I'm interested in, and that I think is like a fundamentally feminine position. I think like yeah, right, as you said, as Andrea Longshore in fact says, like the this like mode of longing for something that we can't have, and like loving like so much, like loving writing so much, loving mediation so much, loving the subjects that you're writing about so much. Like Chris Krause's I Love Dick is kind of like the book about this, like that perfectly synthesizes like all of the theory and the practice and like the lived experience, right, into into this amazing document about what it means to how writing comes from like longing. But
Yeah.
she, however, is not a girl in that book. That's crucially, she's turning 40 as a woman.
Mhm.
So that's slightly different, maybe.
Yeah. Well, I also wonder if it's like a change since then and now, like just kind of the way, obviously, like the way that like um femininity has like figured into the internet and like into the way we interact on social media. Like it even makes me think about that, like when that TikTok trend went like really big of like the like NPC girls who were like ice cream so good, like click like send them like a token,
Oh,
and like that became such a big thing. And it was just like, and like there were like even guys doing it, but like they were, it was like, I don't know, it was just interesting. Yeah, I was just like felt like a very like kind of moment like that. Um, where he also, yeah, and I guess talking about this essay too, just kind of like where um there's like these like fissures kind of in reality. In the book, there's like I feel like Kendall is looking at a pixelated sky. Things kind of like seem broken. And that's where kind of there's this, and in this essay you kind of write about, that's where like these kind of like fissures and stuff, these kind of breaks, tears, there's kind of like that's where there's like this interesting kind of like sensual aesthetic like place. I don't know. Yeah, if you want to talk more about that or
I think this is like, I think, yeah, this makes sense to pair with the book. I was definitely coming from a same intellectual and like aesthetic space when writing this essay, which I'll like drop in the chat later. But like the piece is sort of structured as like these are just some of the images that are in the actual essay, like arranged in the square. Like moving associatively between images, kind of simulating um I was reading a lot of like Lacanian philosophy, I guess, at the time, in particular Lenka Zupančič, who has this amazing book called What is Sex? Um, that is, like hardcore philosophy. But like when I was reading it, I am like interested in that tradition of theory, but like I was also kind of almost knowingly misreading the book um uh and her language in a way that was much more like associative, I guess, in the way that actually psychoanalysis works in practice, or like Freudian, this kind of like image pun word association. Like I was so interested in the way that like despite being to some extent trained in theory, or in like having read some Lacan, like knowing that I was like using the words wrong in my mind, um like you can't stop like creating your own meanings out of
Mhm.
what you're reading,
Yeah.
and I think that's what fan fiction is about too. Like you there's like a sort of natural human impulse to that's almost like antisocial, or like highly private, because you're like constructing your own semiotic system, your own fantasies that like honestly might not have anything to do with anyone else's shared reality, much less like your boyfriend Lil Peep, who's like there, right? Like this kind of disconnect between two people that can exist, or that can exist in a society within one text, within your own reading of one text. You can have a kind of like, oh yeah, I get that, let's say um a rip, like in, or a tear or a gap, let's say, has a specific uh sort of linguistic meaning, in this sense, like a highly codified, it's almost like a scientific term for these philosophers, but it can also send me down this like visual rabbit hole of like a hole in jeans, or like this like different screenshots from movies that then make me think about like holes in the Sofia Coppola movie. I don't know.
Yeah, no, yeah, and just yeah, also what like I what was the, oh yeah, eclipse, because yeah, also relating to like I mean, Eclipse, obviously, I remember you writing about how like 50 Shades of Grey is like a work of fan fiction on Twilight. And also, I know you mentioned kind of your interest in like YA literature and books and stuff. But yeah, as being kind of also like this place where there's like a lot of emotional charge and like you're still getting a grab on like a hold on like the words in a way. But yeah, no, I love that essay a lot too. And I love the way you talk about the Ed Ruscha paintings. Um yeah, it's like as such just another artist, kind of I'm curious to hear you talk more about and like the way the like paint the words peel off and stuff.
Yeah, I think like with Ruscha, like um for example, like the self, the sort of ribbon that says self that's up here in this image. It's probably one of my favorite ones. I don't know. It's very like in a way, like a lot of people are like really don't like him. It's kind of like dumb art, or it's very like so it's like it is basically like an ad, or it has like Museum of Ice Cream vibes today, I guess, because of types of things that you see on Tumblr, which is like probably where I first saw the stuff and where my entire like image education comes from. It, like, but I think he's like one of the only artists who not just artists, like thinkers in general. Maybe there's more poets who like have the sensibility where it's like I my relationship to words is much more like about almost the individual word. Like I'm very obsessive about sort of individual words like sparkle or like whatever, like for example the all caps words would have been in Island Time, that they feel more like objects, I guess, to me. And he creates this kind of graphic, he like also works so much with like I mean this is just like a charcoal drawing or something, but like making things out of like food or like dyes or like things that like have a specific smell, and then like using that as pigment or whatever, um to make a painting of a word that is like from an advertisement, let's say. And it's clear, it's like, oh, these words were just kind of like obsessively like running in your mind, and you had a sort of almost synesthetic reaction to them that you just had to put on the, in this case, on the canvas or whatever. That's what
Yeah,
it's like, yeah.
it's like that experience of like you like say a word so many times that you like kind of like start to like understand it, or like it feels like really different in your head almost.
Yeah. It's become right, it's becoming material rather than semiotic. And in
Mhm.
this case, in the case of Ruscha, it's becoming graphic, specifically. And then in Island Time too, like it's like that's why it's so like graphically designed, I guess. It's whatever. So
Yeah. Okay. And then what was last? I guess I was trying to think. I have like a ton of different like notes and stuff that I've written. I know we're also coming close on a Q&A. So um but yeah, I think what was I gonna
oh, the YA, like did we
yeah.
that is, I guess that's similar where it's just like I think what's compelling about YA is like as a reader. I mean, they're written by like 50-year-old women or whatever usually, but like you're I remember like seeing the book Twilight, and like I read about this in this essay, but it's like the impact that it had on me, which is like the cover is like of a red apple, right, in these white hands, and it's like shiny and black, and it's like so obviously not a kid's book. And like to me, it was like it felt like I was seeing a book for the first time. It was like, holy shit, like what is that? Like I need to read that. Like I remember like a girl brought it into school, um, who, and like it literally was so the perfect metaphor, like the apple of knowledge or whatever. Like
Yeah.
you know what's in there, and it's this like loss of innocence story, and like it's going to be sexy. I knew on understood on some level. I was like, wow, this graphic design is really working the way it's supposed to.
Yeah. Oh my God, I
Like
think I accidentally deleted the picture of the cover,
you
but
yeah,
we know it's iconic.
it's iconic. It's like one of the most iconic images of like our times, I think.
No, truly.
Like, and and the experience of reading, obviously I didn't learn how to read in 5th grade, but like in another sense, kind of like you're new to reading still, or just to novels. Like,
Yeah.
and this sort of, I think it's not just that you're like discovering in that book, like discovering sort of like sex for the first time, as the character also is usually in YA. Like you're also kind of like you're having this strong emotion, like this physical reaction almost to like the experience of like mediation itself, or the
Mm.
experience of literature, or the experience of image. Like we all remember like our first times going online. In my case, it was these like nerdy role-playing games or virtual worlds. Like we all remember like early movies that we saw where, and I think music in particular works this way, right? Like this is why people like are always playing songs from like their teenage years up till when they're like 90, because like nothing is like more powerful as an experience of art, I think, and of most emotions and of sex and of love than like what you're experiencing when you're like 13, unfortunately. I mean, I don't know. I guess I'm maybe when I hit 60, like new things will open up for me, hopefully. But like so far, that's definitely been true.
No, yeah. I feel like even, I mean, in adulthood, I feel like are constantly searching for those things that put us back in that like place of first experiencing desire or first experiencing like love for literature or love for like an aesthetic sensation. And it's like it's like you said earlier, like there now all we can like get is a ghost of that experience, which is just like kind of one of the more like I guess frustrating parts of being alive. But yeah, I'm trying to think what were there other slides we didn't touch on, or what else do we have here? I think we pretty much went through most of them. Um, oh yeah, the James Dean. That was just funny. I also just remember that Architectural Digest covers. Yeah, and like that as like a sculpture in general. It's just funny. Like I don't know, like I feel like I've said this multiple times, but like the pulsing and glowing, just kind of, I don't know, I just love that so much. I kept coming back to like whenever I saw it, or like just this like the sort of energy that is like bouncing off of things in the book is really cool.
Yeah, and it's so good. It's just so insane that Kendall has this in her house. Like, this is
Insane.
another thing about this like fan fiction. Like, there's already so much good stuff out there that you can like, there's already so much strange stuff that you can repurpose, or that like um also like in other people's, it feels really silly to kind of always like have to like start your novel from scratch or something. Like, why do that when like there's so many incredible writers and artists that have like made these objects and worlds and characters? Um, like what is this like? It's egotism, right? It's like it's like, oh no, like I need to make something new. And like it has to be like born from my brain, like this very male, right? Like if we're gonna gender it and talk about girls and writing, like model of like genius, where guys aren't supposed to be fans, right? Like girls are fans, and like the things that they make are often like um kind of from that position. I even think about like my favorite philosophers like Alenka Zupančič, who wrote that book, or Joan Kopchak, who are both like Lacanian philosophers. This is kind of like ad hominem, I guess, but or ad woman, ad whatever. But like it's like, oh, to me, like their work is honestly so much more interesting than the original text they're reading by Jacques Lacan. Like they are the people who are making this into an interesting text, but like I don't know, they're just not going to be remembered in the same way, because like, well, okay, this is now getting tricky because like Lacan is like a Freudian, whatever, everyone's always interpreting an old text, but it's um like yeah, making meaning using someone else's language in that sense. Like to me, actually, they're creating a completely new philosophy that's you could never get yourself out of like the seminars of Jacques Lacan. But like that's like one way to think about what they're doing as like fan fiction, right?
That's so, yeah. Yeah, totally. That's so interesting. Even yeah, it's just it's interesting to think of too in terms of like style and like also like in general how that is like what most things come about. I don't know. I feel like I read this thing earlier that what was it? Someone was talking about how like all designers or like something to do with fashion designers, but how like all fashion labels started out as a person. And like the codes of like the fashion house just gets like continually reinterpreted until it becomes this thing that's like totally different from like what was original. Um
Yeah, I think fashion is like the perfect. I'm like, this is funny because this is actually like another obsession I have that I like. I've written about and it's coming out soon with Viscose. Just like a small fashion journal, but like, yeah, style. Like when we talk about style, right? It's like operates in this really interesting place um, between like you have the notion of style in like every single medium. And then you also have like personal style, like and lifestyle. And we think about style as almost like a signature, like the mark of the artist's hand. Like, oh, you see that painting, that's Titian's style. Now, of course, like it's interesting that like not to like bring this into like an AI discussion, which no one wants to hear about anymore, but it's like GPT and like the first thing that they managed to do was like, or what one of the first ways that like the broader public became aware of the capabilities of AI is like, oh, they can do style transfers. Like they can take your selfie and make it into the style of Van Gogh, or they can take your text and do it in the style of Shakespeare. And so like I think that word became further um pushed more into like the public's consciousness in a different way and like understood almost more as like a meme word. And in fashion, it's like a fascinating thing because like, yeah, you have how do you trace like yeah, they're all named, it's like named after Balenciaga, a real man, Cristobal Balenciaga. And then like originally the style of the house is like considered an kind of offshoot of like his maybe not personal style, but like personal style of let's say clothing design. And then but it does become disembodied and becomes something that different figures like Demna Vasalia now have to like embody or yeah, almost embody or ventriloquize in their designs. Um, and in a way that's another way, and it's fan fiction again. Like it's like, you're taking
yeah.
doing something else with it and leaving your own mark. And I do think with Demna, he's totally like in the lineage of the original founder with his like sculptural forms. So like I think that the again that's an example where I think like fashion is like a medium that can like teach us so much. And like I wish that like it's like a lower medium, and if like literary critics or philosophers or novelists, let's say, were more interested in that kind of field, like there would be so many, their practice would grow so much.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. No, I mean it's interesting. Yeah, it's funny it's not taken up with like the same. And at one point it was like, I mean, like Bars wrote about it and like
Yeah.
the fashion system and stuff. But it's funny it's not given that like same critical attention. What was you wrote about the Balenciaga show in 2019, right? I think I read that one too. That was a really cool review. And that's like also like one of my favorite. Like that show is just like fucking incredible. But like the way it's kind of like iterations of like a Balenciaga aesthetic, but like kind of like deconstructed and then like reconstructed and then like performed.
Yeah, totally. It's like fashion is a really, I mean, we're now like kind of random territory, but I guess this whole thing is random. Like, so like runway shows are in a way kind of like the opera, so outmoded and totally irrelevant to us, if they've ever been relevant to anyone other than like a tiny minority of luxury consumers. But it's like there's so I guess that was also, it's like talking about form with this book. It's like inspired by magazines, I think, and like fashion spreads in magazines where it's like you have a caricature kind of like if you have like an editorial spread where it's like 10 images of one model in different locations with different outfits, it's it's like kind of a story, it's like kind of a character, but it's also so much flatter than that and so much more abstract because you can put this person in situations that like even in like an indie film would never fly because it's like, what the fuck is this? Like maybe in a David Lynch movie, you would have a person behaving like that as
Yeah.
on a runway show or in a fashion ad, but normally it has to be representational, it has to be realistic, it has to be situational. And like fashion is this kind of abstracted form of corporate reality and behavior where it's like, you know, maybe the model is in some way even gruesomely, I guess, like has disciplined her body in these really specific ways to like be, let's say, very thin, like be like it's like living on a different plane of existence, like training yourself to walk in a certain way. That's like so far from like realism, I guess.
Yeah, it's so steeped in like the artifice of it. It's like that's all it like it is, and that's like the most interesting thing is like the surface. Um, I guess we can start moving on to the Q&A section unless there's anything else you wanted to discuss or mention.
No.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know, Eleanor, to you usually. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Joel and Olivia. This has been so awesome. It's been such a joy. Um, we've got a few questions from the audience, and I will first turn it over to Madison to ask.
Hi, thank you so much, Olivia and Joel. It's been such an amazing conversation, and I honestly have so many questions. I used some self-control and only wrote down a few. Um, but I think something to start, and parts of your conversation felt like it touched on this on and off throughout, but there seems to be a trend in narrative arts to produce or create that which is close to an artist's lived experience. And Olivia's connection to pop culture in these works like offers an interesting offshoot of that because inherently like our connections to pop culture and celebrities and how we relate to them is a part of our lived experience, but they are inherently not us unless you are a celebrity, which very happy for you. And I guess I wanted to hear more about your thoughts on like the sentiment of writing into your own lived experience versus something more external than that, which it seems like you were just something hit on that too at the end when you were discussing, the idea of, you know, world building from nothing versus the alternative. So I'd love to hear more about that.
I mean, like unfortunately, I do really write from like Island Time is about me, like and like a relationship I had basically. Like and um and I think that the moments that are most successful in the book, like as literature, like come from like very deeply felt emotion. Um, but it's like I guess aesthetically more interesting to me to embed that in a kind of flattened um style and narrative and reading experience. Like I actually don't mind if a lot of the book is quite boring. And that you then sometimes you like zoom into like the character of Kendall and she's really like having an emotion that is maybe more like a traditional character or is like really experiencing something. And it also like breaks style, not just plot. Because that's what like I guess like I say I'm against like realism or realistic fiction in the kind of sense in which that's typically understood, but I do believe in like trying to render real experiences and like in real life, like most of the day is really, really boring and we just like are kind of Kendall Jenner mode, like we're not really there and we're not aware of ourselves, we're not aware of what we're doing, we're kind of like on autopilot walking around. And then sometimes like something snaps and like you are in love or like you're really sad or you're really depressed. And I just think that like using form to do that is like is another way that it's like it's more realistic that way, because I do think we experience emotions as almost like a break in form.
Yeah, like I almost it's like a mirror of our emotional landscape, or one's emotional landscape, and that is where the realism is alive. I like that. Another question I had, which came up when you were showing the like live in progress like video game that one can access from the book. It really sparked this idea of the public's relationship to witnessing progress in different forms. Like I feel like with art, there's some public expectation that we want to receive or be a witness to that art or entertainment once it's complete, or once it's been deemed like in a state of completion. But with something like commerce, we're constantly watching businesses rise and fall, like inflate and deflate. Like in theory, for a business, you could put that business live once you have the idea and funding, and then kind of watch its life. And that's a little less common with the development of art, which is interesting. Like even if you take a movie, you know, we're seeing the final product of the movie. We're not seeing, you know, you can watch the director's cut in June and then the final product in, you know, September. But I don't know if like we are inherently against watching that progress either. I mean, we love a blooper. I don't know. So was there any reticence when you were putting that sort of the video game in its current state live, or was it in some sort of protest to that instinct? Or
No reticence. I mean, yeah, I think again, it's showing things in process or having like a continually evolving project feels to me more true to life, I guess. And it's just like how I work. I think like even like things I'm writing now feel like continuations of this, or like I'm interested in like thinking about the book as like one node in a system, and like reusing characters and keeping, I mean, I'm one person. Like it would be impossible for me to write something that is completely new, and I would rather I would hope that I would evolve as a person and as a writer, but like I would again rather be sort of transparent about that process, and like the fact that certain themes are like what obsess me still, like 3 years later, which isn't that much time, right? And trying to sort of have the structure of the work mirror that.
awesome. And then Eleanor, I had one more question, but I don't want to, are there other people waiting in line, or is that okay?
I have a
Okay.
question, but you should go ahead, Madison.
Okay. This one might be a little quicker, but kind of harkening back to the beginning of your conversation where you and Joel were showing us the actual text of the book. And granted, I could only see so well, so this could be a misinterpretation, but there was something that evoked typographies and formatting of typically like dialogue driven mediums like screenplays and plays and things like that. I know you spoke a little bit to how your computer science background played into that, but I was wondering, I don't know, there's something like directional too, even about the language. So I don't know if you wanted to speak to that.
I actually, yeah, and this is, I forgot about this, but actually, in addition to studying computer science, I studied playwriting. Like that was how I first came to writing. And I really liked the conventions of playwriting, and I guess also screenwriting is like this, where you have so many different levels of text, different, yeah, layers or something of different types of text on the page. You have the dialogue, and you understand that that's existing in a completely different layer of reality or mediation than the stage instructions or stage directions. And they're set differently, but there's also like if it's an interesting playwright, if it's an interesting play to read on the page, there will be like sort of, you can really do like some people write stage directions in a way that's very literal and boring, and some people make it actually quite abstract and like you see how like the instruction or like I'm interested in all kinds of texts that are kind of like low forms of texts, like poor texts or something like that are like metadata also, like that are not the real text, right? Like in the way that a song lyric on a page is not the real artwork. It's like the ghost, as I've been talking about. So I started writing fiction really only because like I didn't have the means to make a movie or a play. And then I discovered that like I was actually really interested in this affordance of like how this problem of the impossibility of representing real action or real image on the page.
Amazing. Thank you for those questions, Madison. And thank you so much, Olivia. I wanted to ask you whether this project has caused you to think about celebrities differently, or if you find yourself relating in a new way to celebrities or projecting yourself onto them maybe in a different way, or just kind of how that has evolved through this work.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I guess no. I think that's what's maybe more, that's almost like what's most disturbing about it. Like, I still really like Instagram. I would think that like writing about Kendall Jenner in this way would have like purged me of something, but like I think there's a kind of that's why it's so creepy, like how well these images work, like how well images of pretty girls work. And why I also like don't really feel like I'm gonna stop writing about pretty girls, because it's like no one gets bored of them ever. Like I don't get bored of them, but also like our culture doesn't get bored of them. And that in and of itself um is interesting. Like this has been people's subject matter in art and writing for so long, and like I'm getting older, but like the girls always stay the same age, right? Like and no matter what medium, no matter like the platforms are dying, but like there's always going to be a figure like this, right? um and also like with like surgery and stuff, like we're really getting into a place where like the timelessness of like the female um that the young girl figure is becoming kind of almost more literal. Like you can, if you're an avatar, you literally can stay that same age forever. You can um freeze time, and these different new modes of temporality that are gendered temporality, I think, that are emerging are interesting to me. And same with celebrity, like it's a constant, you know, we never get bored of them, even though like they're always the same.
That's really interesting. Thank you so much. Um, I just see a question coming in, I think from Johan. Johan, if you would like to unmute, I'll give you that opportunity. I can also read it if you want. It's in the chat here. So so you were talking about alienation in form, and you mentioned the appearance of Lil Peep lyrics in Island Time pales in comparison to the real thing. I find this interesting because it seems like written works for many today are not primary. Writing aspires toward performance, or writing is alienating by not being as real as performance. Would you say, does Island Time aspire towards being like a video game or some kind of virtual reality where objects really glow rather than are capitalized, or is the book enough, if that's the right word, quote unquote?
Well, I think they're completely different things. Like that's why I'm interested in creating iterations like on the same theme, or like creating the same book in like 3 different formats, or in this case 2 different formats, like because seeing that formal, experiencing it in those 2 different forms like teaches you something about form. Like it teaches me as an artist something about form, and it teaches you as the reader something about form, and ideally the thing it's teaching you is actually also the plot of the book in this case. So I think like in terms of which is primary, no, like the page is primary for me in this case, like because I think that is the medium in which like you best can isolate this experience of not enoughness, which is what I'm interested in. If I was a writer who was interested in enoughness or something, I don't know, like that would be a completely different book in terms of the plot and then also in terms of the form. And yeah, I guess that's the answer.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Olivia. And thank you, Joel, for your amazing questions. This has been such a wonderful conversation today. That's gonna conclude our Q&A. Again, just huge thanks to you both for this amazing conversation. We'd also, as always, like to thank the Terra Foundation for American Art for sponsoring the NSE and for supporting our archive, which you can explore on the Rails YouTube channel, and this conversation will be posted there very soon. The Rail's been free and independent for 23 years, and we hope you might consider donating to support our writers, production staff, and operations, and there's a link to that in the chat. And join us tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time for a conversation with Stephanie Cassidy, Michael Hall, Ksenia Norrell, and William Corwin on the Art Students League of New York. Thank you all so much again, and I'll now turn on the microphones to say hello and goodbye as we leave. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thanks,
Thank
Olivia.
you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
guys.
Thank you so